Well, good evening, everybody. Chag Sameach. Wishing you a continued happy Passover season at this time of year. Welcome to the second and final class in this spring spirituality series. And we are calling this The Heart of Jewish Spirituality, Emotional Power in Religious Life. And want to thank our Adult Education Committee here at Temple Sinai for sponsoring this two-part series, and our very deep thanks to co-chairs of our Adult Education Committee, Ruth Goldstein and Valerie Kaimea, and to all the members of the Adult Education Committee for all the wonderful work that they do throughout the year. It is greatly appreciated. So I am going to begin sharing my screen right now. And hopefully everybody can see that. Are you able to see my screen? Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, just to recap, a quick review of last week, and if you are new to joining for the first time this week, welcome. So let me go back a step. The way that we're framing this class and this conversation together is that as important as beliefs and theology are to Judaism and to all religions, as important as those beliefs and the theology is, and it really is essential to religious faith, the way that we're looking at this is that our emotional life, not necessarily our cognitive life, although working with our cognitive life, but that our emotional life, our feelings, are really the driving factor of religious life. That our emotions are crucial to human spirituality, and that they are a complement to belief and theology and ideas. And in many ways, they are the driving force to those beliefs, the theology, and those ideas. And we'll
Rabbi, can I ask you a real quick question?
Yes,
All
Susan.
we see is a white screen. Is that possible?
That's by design.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you for asking. Yes, that is by design. And so what we looked at last class is two primary spiritual emotions. We looked at joy and awe, and we're going to revisit joy again very quickly at the beginning because felt like we didn't really give it enough time to devote, and joy is so essential to religious life and to Judaism. I want to give it its due. So we're looking at Jewish traditions, Jewish spiritual practices, Jewish teachings about the emotional life, and we're also looking at two sources from the neuroscience world and from the affective psychology world, affective meaning emotion. And the two sources that we're looking at are a book by Dr. George Valiant of Harvard University, his phenomenal book, Spiritual Evolution, which I highly recommend you, if you're interested, that you get that on your bookshelf or check it out from the library. George Valiant's Spiritual Evolution. And the second book is written 10 years later by Stephen T. Asma, a professor of philosophy in Chicago, and his book, Why We Need Religion. So we're going to be looking at both their ideas again tonight. And we're going to start with George Valiant. And as we revisit his thesis, which is that he identifies 8 positive emotions that he calls spiritual emotions. And those emotions are compassion, forgiveness, love, hope, joy, faith/trust, awe, and gratitude. And he says, from a neuroscientific standpoint, all these emotions, these positive emotions that are spiritual emotions, are based upon our inborn mammalian capacity for unselfish parental love. Now, one does not have to be a parent to have these emotions, obviously. But the evolutionary argument is that we have these emotions, these positive emotions, to help people evolutionarily, help our ancestors and perhaps us and our descendants, for them to become parents as well and pass on our genes to keep the human species alive. And it is the emotional center of our lives, our limbic system in connection, interwoven with our cortex as human beings and other parts of our brain networks that give us these spiritual emotions, these positive emotions that, as he says also in bold, these positive emotions are a common denominator of all major faiths and of all human beings. So they're universal. They're involved in all major religions. And more than that, and again, this is what really touched me and moved me about what he was saying in his book, Spiritual Evolution. He says organized religions have been the best means that human beings have found to bring these positive emotions into our conscious reflection. And we can say even further, based upon his argument, organized religion is the best means for us to manifest these positive emotions in our lives. They're not the only way, but they are in some ways the best ways to do so, that religion gives these emotions, these 8 emotions, center stage in what we do, in our religious practices, in our spirituality, that these emotions are center stage in religious life. So that's the idea, and that is the thesis that one can agree or disagree with. I happen to agree with it. And we looked at last week joy and awe. Tonight we're also going to look at love, compassion, and grief, and ways to heal grief. But let's return to joy, because joy really is such a huge part of Judaism and other faith traditions. I don't think we would be active in our religious or spiritual life if we weren't experiencing joy, if we weren't experiencing a sense of happiness and joy and positive feelings. And again, there are other positive feelings, but here's where joy is really front and center in Jewish life. And then after we look at this, I encourage you to add to the list. So here's where we find joy in Judaism, some of the main places. Every week, Shabbat, the most important Jewish holiday that occurs 52 times a year, is meant to be joyful. Even the refreshments afterward we call oneg means delight. It is meant to be delightful. Shabbat is meant to be delightful. We gather with family, we gather with friends, we gather with the community, and we wish each other well, a Shabbat Shalom. We give each other a hug or shake each other's hand. We enjoy beautiful music, which is a great source of joy. We read uplifting prayers, which is a source of joy. We eat together. In the home, we have family or friends over. We go out in nature, which is joyful and can be an awe-filled experience. Traditionally, one tries to avoid work on Shabbat so that we can de-stress from the week and experience joy instead of anxiety and worry and stress. So joy is built into the practice of Shabbat on pretty much every level. So that's 52 times a year if one celebrates Shabbat every week, or has what a professor of mine called during the week Shabbat moments, to try to have a joyful Shabbat moment during the week if you work on Saturday. Festivals, similarly, Sukkot is called Zaman Simchatenu, the season of our joy, literally. It's in the designation for Sukkot, our holiday of gratitude. It is called the season of our joy, our simcha, our joy, our happiness. Simchat Torah, the word joy is built into the title. Rejoicing, joy with the Torah. Purim, the Talmud says that at the beginning of the month of Adar, and Purim's on the 14th day of Adar, at the beginning of Adar, we should start getting joyful. We should start cultivating joy so that we will be joyful during our Purim celebration, where we're silly and we dress up and we make noise and we eat food and we gather with people and we're very childlike and playful. It's all part of these major Jewish festivals. Passover is meant to be joyful, right? We get together with family and friends, we sing, we eat. Passover too is meant to be a joyful experience. When we gather as a community, as a spiritual community, we, as I said, we pray, we sing. In the Hasidic tradition, and this might be your experience as well, and a couple of people have told me, music moves you so much in Judaism. One of the main ways that you might connect in Judaism is through music. And Rabbi Nachman of Breslov said it is the quickest way to the divine is music. Beethoven famously composed the Ninth Symphony, Ode to Joy. And if you've heard Beethoven's Ninth, particularly the last movement, can't help but really put a smile on one's face. It is so powerful. So these are all manifestations of joy in our spiritual life. We have shared meals together. We are with community. We are experiencing friendship and fellowship with each other. That is joyful. That is meant to be joyful. Life cycle events. Also a gathering of people, family, friends, community, food, celebrating the joy at a birth, at a B'nai Mitzvah ceremony, at a marriage, at an announcement of marriage. These are all moments where we share in each other's joy and we have sympathetic joy with others. We feel the joy of others. Doing Gimilut Chasadim, acts of kindness, are meant to be joyful. There has been research done on they call it the helper's high, that when you give, when you help another person, when you are kind, not only does it benefit them, it benefits us, it benefits the giver as well as the receiver. So acts of kindness are meant to be a joyful experience. They've done studies. If they give people money, you can spend the money on yourself or you can spend the money on giving it to other people. The people who give the money away experience a more lasting joy for a longer duration than if they just were to spend the money on themselves. It is meant to be shared. As mammals, we are meant to share with each other. That gives us joy, that lights up networks and turns on neurotransmitters in our brain like dopamine and endorphins. And we're going to talk about love, oxytocin. It's called the bonding or the cuddle hormone. There are all these ways that these activities are meant to produce positive emotions, and positive neurotransmitters and natural endorphins that make us feel good. They're all stimulated by these activities and they bring us joy. and joy in doing mitzvot. It's called simcha shel mitzvah, to do a mitzvah, to give tzedakah, to visit the sick, to rejoice with bride and groom, to do these other mitzvahs, again, are meant to produce joy. And as we looked at last week, the words of the psalmist, serve God with joy, meaning do mitzvot with joy. And that's a big part of the Hasidic tradition. So, and we can probably think of other ways that we experience joy in Judaism, and I would encourage you to put them in the chat box. Havdalah, yeah, to gather with folks, and at the end of Shabbat, and have that beautiful moment where there's spices and candles, or turning the lights down and music. The joy of learning. Yes, thank you, Andrea. The joy of learning. Right? It's a mitzvah to learn in Judaism. And yeah, absolutely. If you enjoy learning, that brings a tremendous amount of happiness and fulfillment and positive emotion. I'm sure for those of us who love to learn, if they were to hook us up to an fMRI machine, they would see certain parts of our brain light up that are letting us know this is a joyful moment for us. Being in a chavurah, yes, being in a friendship group and getting together with other people and socializing and eating and laughing and telling stories and celebrating Jewish holidays or going to a concert. Yeah, a chavurah, very much. Our affinity groups that we recently started, we encourage you to be involved in one of the many affinity groups that we recently started up, are meant to be a joyful experience. Yeah, Deidre, the joy of creating. Absolutely. Right. Yes, creation is, to create something is very much a joyful activity, if not in the moment, having created it, and then experiencing the accomplishment of having done something like that. There is joy perhaps before, during, and after. Yeah. Great examples, everybody. Okay, well, let's continue on then. So we're moving from joy and awe of last week into love and compassion and to grief and the healing of grief. So what does Judaism say about love? It says a lot. As I mentioned last week and during Yom Kippur, a 350-page book was written about Judaism. The title is Judaism is About Love. And here are some major examples of that. Of course, love your neighbor as yourself. From the book of Leviticus, Rabbi Akiva said is the greatest mitzvah, the greatest value in the entire Torah. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then, of course, the V'ahavta, love the eternal your God with all your heart, soul, and might. And then a beautiful quote from the prophet Jeremiah, where God says to the Jewish people, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Ahavat olam. That's where we get a prayer in our prayer service. Ahavat olam, right before the Shema. That phrase, Ahavat olam, everlasting love, eternal love. God says, I have loved you with an everlasting, eternal love. I have drawn you. I have drawn you. I have birthed you. I have nurtured you with loving kindness. Or you can think of, I have drawn you, I've created you with loving kindness for loving kindness. So beautiful Jewish teachings about love. So now, when do we experience love in Judaism? We talked about it a little bit, but I wonder if we could just go a little bit deeper. Why don't you think about when you have felt love in Judaism? And let's put that in the chat box, or you can unmute and just share it with us. Ah, Philip, at my wedding. Absolutely. Yes.
I was going to say the same thing, Rabbi.
Oh my goodness, how wonderful you two are in sync. How appropriate. Yes, at your wedding. Oh, Jill, thank you. When we
Yes.
call up the interfaith families, the interfaith partners, the Jewish and the Jewish adjacent folks, and we bless them on Yom Kippur. Yeah, we are expressing our love and our gratitude. And by the way, some of these emotions, as you know, they work together. Love and gratitude often go hand in hand. Love and compassion go hand in hand. Love and forgiveness are often related. It's hard to sustain love without forgiveness. And although we're not looking at forgiveness tonight, that is one of the spiritual emotions, that is one of the positive emotions that George Valiant devotes a chapter to in his book, and that as mammals and as nurturing creatures, we need to be able to forgive our family members and they need to forgive us to maintain those relationships. So yeah, at a baby naming. Yeah, filled with love, the love of that family. And again, sort of the sympathetic love we feel for that family, the love that we have for them. Observing Shabbat. Yes. Yeah. Family and friends and community, the love that experienced during Shabbat when helping someone. Yes. We are built to help other people, to nurture other people. Erich Fromm, a great Jewish theologian and psychoanalyst of the 20th century, wrote a best-selling book in the 1950s called The Art of Loving. I based my rabbinical thesis in part on that book and on his philosophy of love and his teachings about it. He said that society can't last a day without love. Society cannot last a day without love, expressed as kindness and helping and compassion and forgiveness and all the things. Let me go on down there. Seeing our children in religious school, learning, participating, carrying on the traditions of our ancestors. Yeah, the love that we feel and knowing that they're enjoying Judaism and they're having these positive Jewish experiences that hopefully they're gonna live throughout their life and then pass on to the next generation, and to know that Jewish people have been doing this for 3,000 plus years. It's amazing. Carol, I feel it at a funeral when we all support the family and each other. Yes, a lot of love at those times where people are in need of healing, a funeral. Definitely, we're going to talk about that in depth in a moment when we talk about grief, because and we'll get to Stephen Asma's work. So powerful what he has to say about it and what Judaism has to say about it. And along those lines, visiting somebody who's sick, calling somebody who's sick, calling somebody that we haven't seen in a while or that we know might could benefit from our care. So another way to say love is to say care. And our mammalian care system, we would not be able to continue to evolve and to produce offspring if we did not have that love built into that care system. So oxytocin, you may have heard that word. Oxytocin is a hormone that is produced in the human brain, not just the human brain, the mammalian brain. All mammals produce oxytocin, and oxytocin is this bonding hormone. It is this caring hormone, this love hormone, and it allows not only a mother to bond with her child and a child to bond with the parent, but for spouses and partners to bond with each other, for siblings to bond, for friends to bond. If somebody again were to, in those moments that we're having a moment of care and connection and a moment of love with somebody, family, friend, stranger, coworker, you name it. If there is a moment of connection, and with animals, um, if there's a moment of connection, my sense is that oxytocin is being produced. Um, as well as some other neurochemicals. We all produce it. Women produce it right when they're getting ready to give birth, but men also produce oxytocin. So it's not just specific to one gender. Every gender produces oxytocin, and again, our animals do too. Um, Following up on my previous comment, Philip said, when your son chants the Via Hafta, sure, at a Shabbat service, so there's a double one. He's chanting the verses about love, about loving God, and about teaching it to our children, and then having the pride and the love and seeing your child, seeing Andrew leading that. Yeah, very powerful. So all these great areas in which we experience love.
Right here.
Any other ones? Any other ones? Okay, well, let's move on then. Let's move on. Again, if you're interested in the book, I'll put it in the chat box. It's not the easiest read, but again, it's a great title and it's got some great stuff in there. Judaism is all about love by Rabbi Schechter.
Man.
Okay. Okay, so let us move on to a related emotion, a related spiritual emotion, compassion. What does Judaism say about compassion? This is a beautiful quote from the Psalms. And by the way, the Psalms, the original Jewish prayer book, 150 different psalms, poems, songs, prayers, filled with emotion, filled with the whole gamut of human emotions and these positive emotions that George Valiant talks about. The book of Psalms is filled with awe and joy and love and compassion and grief and forgiveness and request for forgiveness. It's also filled with sorrow. It's filled with loneliness. It's filled with, pretty much, I'm hesitating because I think psychologists these days have affected 36, something like 36 different emotions. According to work at UC Berkeley, they're something like, 35, 36 emotions. They're probably not all in the book of Psalms, but I think a lot of them are. So here's one from Psalm 145 related to compassion. The eternal is gracious, so God is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in kindness, says Psalm 145. The eternal is good to all, and God's compassion is upon all God's works. So, two very strong verses about God's compassion, linking that to kindness, graciousness. The Hebrew word for compassion is rachamim, or rachmanis is the Yiddish version of it. The root of the word rachamim, rechem, means womb, a mother's womb. So in Judaism, this idea of feeling compassion, and maybe we should define compassion in the way that a psychologist would define compassion. Compassion is empathizing, feeling the pain of another. Literally, the word compassion means to suffer with. So it's feeling the pain of another, and there's another layer to it. So that's empathy. Empathy is to feel the pain of another. But the other layer to it, the way psychologists define it now, is it's then being motivated to alleviate that pain. It's not just feeling someone's pain. It's being motivated to do something about it. It's being motivated to help them in their suffering, to alleviate their suffering. So in Judaism, it's important for us to feel empathy, and to talk about empathy, and to say prayers of healing for people, and to experience that empathy and that love and concern. And Judaism also asks us to try to act in a way that we're going to diminish the suffering of that person we're thinking about.
Rabbi,
Yes, Susie.
anthropologist Margaret Mead was once asked by one of her students, what was the first evidence of civilization? And she put up a photo of a broken femur that had healed, and it was from a Neanderthal. Somebody had to stay behind and care for this person. And that kind of compassion, she said, was the first sign of civilization, caring for another.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Susie. Yeah, the healing professions are really, I don't know how one can go into those professions and not have a sense of compassion. It's sort of hand in glove. So absolutely, the healing professions, caring for another, willing to sacrifice for another. I mean, that's love too. I mean, that's again why love and compassion go hand in hand. But the sacrifices that people make for another to alleviate their suffering, to help them out, such an amazing thing. I just want to share with you, and I know I keep talking about my dog Max because he's taught me so much about love and compassion. And maybe your dog or your cat or your animal does too, as well as people that you know. But my son Evan learned that if he would whimper, if Evan himself, my son would whimper around Max, Max would run up to him and lick his face. Max, again, being a mammal, he's got this compassion too. He's got this limbic system too. He's got this desire to alleviate suffering too. So Evan sort of mock pretends he's suffering by whimpering, and Max comes over to to lick his face and to say, I'm here for you. I want you to feel better, without voicing those things.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I don't know how many of us saw it, but to what during the earthquake, when the earthquake occurred yesterday in San Diego, when I believe it was elephants circled the littlest one and protected the elephant.
Wow.
It was real. You haven't seen it, it's worth trying to find it on Google. It was really beautiful.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Carol. Yeah, it's amazing that we share this, that animals have this. It's not just us. It's mammals have that impulse too. They have these emotions too. They do these actions as well. And yeah, and by the way, and George Valiant goes into this in pretty good detail in Spiritual Evolution, because he looks at ethologists, and I had to look up that word, ethology, not ethnology, but ethology is the study of animal behavior. So yeah, when people study, like Jane Goodall is an ethologist. Am I pronouncing it right? I think it's ethologist. Jane Goodall and these other people, who work with primates or work with other animals, or check out there was on Netflix, there was something about, it's called, I think, the life of your dog or the mind of your dog, where at the Charles Schultz donated money to train service animals, right? The guy who wrote Peanuts, right? Snoopy. So he donated money for this place to train service animals. And when you see how these service animals, how they train them and their natural inclination to help others, and they're really they are sacrificing their life. Some particular breed of animal is really built to care for others. I don't think Max would qualify he wouldn't make it into the university of service, because that's not his breed. but certain breeds are really very good at spending most of their time caring for other people, and they derive a lot of pleasure out of it. It's not like they feel like, oh, I've got it so bad and this other dog's got it so good. It's really what they're built for. At least that's what they say at Charles Schulz University of Service Animals. I don't know what the name of it. Yeah, thank you, Jill, for sharing that about the elephants and the earthquake. Yeah, so us mammals, we mammals are built for compassion and for love and for care. And just to, to give you another quote, also from, oh, this is from the prophet Zechariah. So in addition to justice, administer true justice, says the prophet Zechariah. Show kindness and compassion to one another. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor. This grouping of four occurs again and again in the Torah and in the prophets and in Jewish tradition. Caring for the widow and the orphan, fatherless and motherless. So we could say caring for the widow, the orphan, the stranger, the foreigner, and the poor. You know, why are those four mentioned time and time again in the Jewish tradition? What they have in common is they were the most vulnerable members of ancient Israelite society. A widow did not have the resources of somebody who had, back then, a male husband who could financially provide. An orphan clearly, did not have the resources of people who had parents. A stranger was vulnerable to being ill-treated. The poor do not have the financial resources. So, time and again, our tradition says, you have got to care for these most vulnerable members of society. And Judaism would say a society will be judged on how well they treat the most vulnerable members. Yeah, and as Renee said, inviting strangers to our Seder. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Right? We say that in the Haggadah. Let all who are hungry come and eat. The compassion that God showed for the Jewish people at Passover, we are meant to extend to everybody. And we are meant to share our resources with others. And in doing so, we will experience joy, as well as fulfilling the mitzvah of caring for others. So, yeah, it's all there. It's all there. So we're going to talk about it later, but I want to introduce it now. I talked about it last week. I can't remember how deep we went into it. The mammalian separation cry. The cry that baby mammals produce when they are in need, when they are separated, when they are hungry, when they need something. Mammals will cry out when they're really young to elicit a response from a caregiver. So baby or young mammals produce that sound to receive the care, and usually an adult or an older caregiver will feel compassion. They will feel that suffering, and they will want to do something to alleviate it. And again, that's what I did when I had no knowledge of how to care for a dog in my life. And poor Max, we just got him, adopted him, and we put him in a room and closed the door at night, and we all went upstairs because we didn't know what we were doing. And within 5 minutes, Max started crying. And we're like, what's he doing? And he was crying and crying, and it didn't take long for me to say, I've got to go down and be with him. And so I went down to sleep with Max in the room, because at that point we weren't taking him upstairs. And in a couple of weeks or months, he was sleeping in our bed. But it took us, a short period of time to realize what we needed to do to care for him. But it was that mammalian separation cry that Max, invoked, that he did. And I came running, and I was willing to sacrifice my night's sleep so that he would be okay. And then he curled up right under, in my leg, right in the hollow of my leg, curled up right beside me. And like I say, that's the moment where Max became my third child. That's the moment where he became my third child. And it was the compassion that was built in me that Max was tapping into. And, and April felt it very quickly too. So it's linked to love and compassion. And by the way, we have mirror neurons. There's something called mirror neurons that mammals have, human beings have. They're parts of our brain where we feel the pain of others. And the classic example that I like to give, I don't know how what's the thing that triggers you in somebody else? And there may be many things where people are suffering that trigger something in you. But if I see somebody in a movie, and they take out a needle and they stick a needle in their arm, I squirm. I squirm. I don't think I cannot squirm. And that is a mirror neuron inside of me feeling, and it's a movie, it's not even real. So it's just stimulating my imagination to say, oh my God, that's painful, or something's going on there. And I feel that pain. So the mirror neurons also help us feel the compassion. We put ourselves in the place, again, with the empathy, we put ourselves in the place through the mirror neurons to sort of imagine what that other being's going through. And then having that experience creates the empathy, which creates the compassion, and then taps into the love and the care system. And it's all linked, it's all related. Okay, when do we experience compassion in Judaism? What would you say? When do you have moments where you had a recognition, feeling compassion right now? At a funeral, yeah, at a funeral. We can put ourselves in the place of somebody who just lost a loved one. We know what that's like. We know how painful that is. And we are there to comfort them and to ease their suffering and let them know they're not alone. When we say Kaddish, yes. When we chant the Misha Berach prayer of healing every Shabbat, yes. When we give charity, our compassion, our desire to alleviate suffering. Yeah. Jill said when we had Mothers for Peace, an Israeli mother who lost their child, and a Palestinian Arab mother who lost her child, and listening to their stories and empathizing with the pain of their terrible losses on both sides, yes. At the bedside of someone who's sick, a loved one who's sick, we feel their pain in that moment as well. Yeah, and we want to help. Somebody once said, I don't know if it was George Vaillant or somebody else, as it relates to compassion, who do you want to help? God forbid if somebody, there's an accident, like in a car on a freeway or something, who do you want to come right away? You want the compassion of your family and your friends, but you also want the compassion of the EMT, because the EMT is not only coming with empathy, they're coming with skills, to heal you or to get you where you need to go to be healed. So it's not to minimize the compassion that people who love one another or who are friends with one another feel. It's to recognize that second component of compassion, that motivation to help, and maybe also having the skills to help, that is so powerful in compassion. So when people talk about compassion fatigue, right? You may have heard this expression. Healers, people in healing professions have compassion fatigue. Some people say that's a misnomer. It's not compassion fatigue, it's empathy fatigue. It's empathizing and feeling somebody's pain so much that you can't recover, you don't have restoration. The EMT is a little bit more removed, a lot more removed than a family member or friend, and therefore the compassion, which is another layer to the empathy, or includes a second layer, it's that motivation to help and alleviate it. That's what's stronger in somebody in a healing profession. Hopefully, that's what's stronger. Because if they feel pain too much, they're going to get burnt out really quickly. There needs to be a boundary. There needs to be a separation in those healing professions that is different than a loved one. And by the way, I would suggest too, for a loved one, God forbid your child or your grandchild or your friend is going through a hard time. If you feel their pain so strongly that it sort of immobilizes you or it paralyzes you, that's not going to help them. They need a distance for you to be able to help. And so that's why empathy is not compassion. It's part of compassion, but it's not the full picture. And they can map in the brain. Richard Davidson up at University of Wisconsin-Madison, he maps people, he connects people to electrodes, puts it in fMRI. The centers of the brain that light up with compassion are different than the pain centers that light up with empathy. The compassion centers that light up are positive emotions. Feeling somebody's pain is not a positive emotion. That's a painful emotion. So it is different. And again, that's why psychologists today say compassion has the two layers. It has the empathy and it has the desire to alleviate. That desire to alleviate the suffering is the positive emotion. Does that make sense? It's a very fine distinction. So compassion fatigue, it's really empathy fatigue. Compassion is not fatiguing, it's energizing. It's a positive emotion. It's restorative. And that's why it's called the helper's high. Because it's restorative. It makes you feel good. Yeah, therapists need to have those boundaries. I'm reading a novel now, and I'm missing part of it about an army nurse during the Vietnam War. Philip liked that book too. Yeah. So anyway, it's a fine distinction. So let's talk now about grief. And by the way, obviously the love and the compassion is going to come into play here. What does Judaism say about grief? Again, the psalmist, the eternal God is near to the brokenhearted. God saves the crushed in spirit. So that God is there to help people in their grief. And by the way, let's define grief. I looked up the American Psychological Association definition, and they have a very succinct definition of grief. I'm sorry I don't have this in the chat box, but if you just sort of listen and receive it. So according to the American Psychological Association, grief is the anguish experienced after significant loss, usually the death of a beloved person, but it also could be the loss of a job or, the loss of a friendship, any loss. But the anguish experienced after significant loss, usually the death of a beloved person. Grief often includes physiological distress. There's that pain, physical pain. And by the way, when people are in grief, and again, they look at people through neuroscience, the same areas of the brain that would light up with if you, broke a limb or you were experiencing physical pain, the same centers of the brain, many of the same centers light up during emotional grief. We feel pain as if we were in physical pain when we are in grief. It includes separation anxiety. Okay, back to that separation, the separation of pain. Grief also includes confusion, yearning, right? Yearning to be with that person, yearning to be with that other being. Sometimes grief includes obsessive dwelling on the past and perhaps apprehension about the future. So that's what we mean by grief. And by the way, there are other emotions involved. There's sometimes anger involved with grief, and obviously sadness, and a host of emotions. So grief is not one emotion. It is an amalgam of emotions, a mixture of emotions. But it is grief as it's being defined, as we're defining it. It involves loss, significant loss, and in this case, the death of a beloved person. So that's why at Psalm 20, at funerals, Jewish, Christian, and other faiths, they may read Psalm 23, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." We need comfort when we are in the valley of the shadow of death. When we experience loss, we are in need of comfort. And so now looking at Professor Stephen Asma in why we need religion, again in the middle of the page there, religion helps people manage their emotional lives. It helps us manage our emotions like grief. And again, he just reiterates the point that George Valiant reiterates. Our emotions are adaptive emotions, meaning our emotions are evolutionary emotions that help us live and thrive. They are enough to generate most religious life. Now, Stephen Asma was raised Catholic in Chicago, and he was an altar boy. And he says in his book, Why We Need Religion, and in other places, he went to hundreds of funerals, and he saw the power, the healing power, the consoling power that was taking place. Even though he didn't necessarily believe in afterlife, he didn't believe what was being said, Stephen Asma. He saw the consoling power of the funeral rites of the Catholic Church. And of course, we know the consoling power in Jewish tradition and the Jewish practices. So how does Judaism help people grieve? Let's take a look at some, and then I want to encourage you to add some more in your experience. The funeral itself, right? Beginning at the funeral. We gather with family and friends and community. People are there for us. So when we were feeling alone, when we were feeling that we have been separated from somebody that we care deeply about, there are other people there to by their presence, express that we are not alone. And they may give us a hug, put an arm on our shoulder, give us physical touch, which as a mammal is comforting. Any mammal is comforted by physical touch. You may have heard of that famous experiment. Harry Harlow was a psychologist. I think he was at Madison when he did this, University of Wisconsin at Madison in the 1950s and early 60s. He took rhesus monkeys, babies. He separated them from their mother. It was very unethical, but what was revealed was remarkable. And he gave these little baby rhesus monkeys two choices, or there were two fake mothers in their room. They could go up to like a wire cage resembling of what a monkey mother would look like with a bottle of milk, which the babies needed to grow. And then he put up another fake monkey, motherly looking monkey made of terry cloth. And the monkeys would go to the terry cloth fake mother more than they would go to the wire mother who was providing milk, because these babies craved physical touch. And not just babies, we crave it too. Any mammal of any age is wired for touch. And that's why love and compassion often involve the physical gesture of touch. And that's what we need at a funeral. That's what we need. By the way, those poor rhesus monkeys, deprived of their mother, terrible pain, emotional pain. They were not well adjusted. They were not happy. It was a horrible experiment, but unethical. I mean, I think one of the reasons they no longer, do experiments like that, because it was just so brutal to these little monkeys, but it revealed so much about how mammals need physical touch and love. Yeah, Jill put in the chat box a picture of those two, fake baby mothers. And you can see the one on the left is terry cloth, and the one on the right is, I think that's the one with, I think that's the one with terry cloth, right? Isn't the one on the left, Jill, is the terry cloth? One on the right has got the bottle of milk, and they needed the one on the left. So also at a funeral, there is prayer and singing, again, to help us feel some comfort and consolation by the joy that music brings, by the positive emotions that music elicits in us. We are in need of some positive emotion it can't just be entirely sad. When we tell stories and people laugh about the funny stories that may be told at a funeral, people need that to console them and to alleviate the suffering and the painful emotions they're going through at a funeral. So the prayer and the singing and the stories, could have listed the stories. And Renee is saying too, orphanages, yes. Poor, children raised in certain orphanages where they're not touched. They're not held or hugged. They do not thrive. They did studies on attachment theory, attachment system. Certain young people if certain children are deprived of affection or touch in the early years, it can impact their entire life. That trauma, that physical manifestation in one's cells, in one's neurons, about missing these necessary, nourishing experiences, it can stay with you, and it needs to be healed in some way later in life. We have a meal of consolation at a funeral, right? In Judaism, and we call it a meal of consolation, Seudat Havra'ah, literally a meal of consolation. And in the Jewish tradition, it is a mitzvah to bring food to the mourner. It is not the mourner's responsibility to provide food for guests that come to a Shiva minyan or that come to the house after the funeral. It is the mourner's responsibility in Judaism to provide that, as if to say, we are here to feed you, like a caretaker for, a young offspring. We're going to feed you. We're going to nourish you. Andrea is adding, may their memory be a blessing. Yes, how memory is such a consolation when we've been separated from someone. Memory is perhaps the greatest consolation when when somebody dies. And then by having those positive memories and eliciting those positive emotions like joy and gratitude and compassion and love, our memories allowing us to re-experience those emotions and re-experience that connection. And that's why we say at a funeral, and I say it and I mean it, that love is stronger than death. I mean, it comes from the Song of Songs, where in the biblical Song of Songs, which actually a Jewish tradition to read on the Shabbat during Passover. So this Friday, the Shabbat and Passover tradition to read Song of Songs, this love poetry in the Jewish Bible. The Song of Songs says that love is as strong as death. Love is as strong as death. And we take it one step further in our liturgy at a funeral to say love is stronger than death. And it is the memory and these experiences of love, the memory of that love, that is stronger than death, that cannot be taken away unless one no longer has the memories. And the Jewish rituals themselves, as Martha's saying, are also a comfort. And Renee is saying, when it's our departed family member's yard site, the anniversary of a death, hearing their names called, when it's time to recite Kaddish at the Shabbat service, another Jewish spiritual practice that's of comfort. Yes, absolutely. So, and just going down the list, Shiva, again, to include all those things, all those bonds of love and care and compassion during Shiva, and food and prayer and singing, if singing takes place. Yes, the recitation of Kaddish, Yartzeit, and Yizkor, the times during the Jewish calendar year where, we say Yizkor at Yom Kippur. There are many people who may not even come to a Yom Kippur service, Kol Nidre, or Yom Kippur morning, but they will come to a Yizkor service. That is the power of the love and the consoling aspect to the Jewish ritual. I'm going to come to the Yizkor service and remember my loved one, be with other people, and re-experience the love that I have for them. And then to say Kaddish for a parent for 11 months every day, or to say Kaddish for a spouse or a sibling, or God forbid a child, but obviously it happens. Reciting Kaddish is meant to be consoling. So we have all these practices, and then not even mentioning the Shloshim period, the first 30 days traditionally in Judaism. I mean, they're really, and this is why, again, back to that word folk psychology that we brought up last time, that Stephen Asma said. This is folk psychology. You know, Jewish tradition, Jewish spirituality knew the power, the healing power, the consoling power, the comforting power of these practices without anybody having any psychology degrees or doing any research or getting a PhD or a master's. They just knew it from living it. That's what Stephen Asma meant by folk psychology is so powerful in religion, spiritual life. And by the way, I want to get back to the main point there too. You know, in the subtitle I put, or the title I put there, we are meant to feel the grief. We can't bypass those painful emotions. What these Jewish practices also do at the funeral and during Shiva and during that first year in reciting Kaddish, it is to recognize and accept that this physical loss has happened and to feel those negative emotions, whatever they are. When I say negative, I just mean painful emotions. To feel the sadness, to feel the loss. If there's anger, to feel the anger. To feel whatever emotions come up for us and make a space for them, make a sacred space for them, and then to heal them in the process through these practices and through the awareness and recognition that we were feeling all these different emotions that we're feeling when a loved one dies. Guilt, shame, embarrassment, you know, you name it. We are meant to feel it all in Judaism, to feel it and then to heal it. And that's what these practices are meant to do, the unveiling ceremony. Yeah, absolutely. There's a reason we ask people at a Jewish funeral to take a shovel full of earth and to do that and not leave it for the workers at the memorial parks. It is for the immediate family in particular and for everybody to recognize the reality of the death. And as you know, people have talked about, sometimes there's a thud. There's literally when you shovel the earth in and it lands on the casket or it lands on, in the grave, there's a thud sound. It's jarring. It's meant to be. It's meant to bring us to the awareness that this person has died. So there's tremendous wisdom and emotion and spirituality. You know, somebody famously said, well, I shouldn't say famously said because I can't remember who said it, but somebody said, religions wouldn't exist if there wasn't death. Now, I think that's an overstatement because as we've been looking in this class, religion just isn't about negative emotion and helping us heal negative emotion. It does that, and it does that exceedingly well, but it's also allowing us to manifest positive emotions. And again, George Vaillant in Spiritual Evolution lists 8 positive emotions that religion helps us manifest, like no other area may be able to do it as well. So for the person who said that if there wasn't death, there wouldn't be religion, it's not true. But point well taken is that religion does help us deal with death in perhaps ways that other cultural institutions do not. Okay. Let's I want to encourage you all, and so Q&A, and I can stop the screen share here. Let me stop the share so our screens are larger. I think I just stopped the share. Did I just stop that? Yeah. Comments, questions, other things that we didn't talk about that you'd wanted to talk about in this brief 2-part series?
I had a comment about the grief rituals for a death, comparing religions. So
Yeah.
when my neighbor passed away, she was Catholic, and apparently I wasn't there when this happened, but apparently she knew she was dying, and she was really concerned about having her last rites administered by a priest. And so it seemed like in that case, now, of course, it usually happens after the person has died, right? I mean, they're not usually asking for it, or maybe they are, I don't know. But it seemed like it was directed more at the person who is dying, whereas I feel like our rituals are more for those of us who are still here, to comfort us and to help us comfort the immediate relatives of the, of the person who passed away. I don't know. I really don't know, because I don't know the whole of what the practice in Catholicism is, but that just kind of struck me.
Well, it's a really good observation, Martha. I think you're right. And what you just said, I will often say when people ask me, can we do this as a ritual? Can we do that as a ritual? And maybe they think that this ritual is not something that their parent would have approved of. And so I will try to balance and say, well, you need to see if you're going to be comfortable doing something that you think that maybe your parent, and it's usually a parent, an elderly parent, might not have wanted. But please keep in mind, I'll say, these rituals are meant for you. They are meant to help you heal and to give you comfort and consolation. So if if one's parent didn't believe in God, but the mourner does, and that is a source of comfort and consolation, I almost feel like it's Jewish spiritual malpractice not to include it and allow for it, because it is for the mourner. These mourning customs are, they're called mourning customs. They're for the mourner. And Martha, you're hitting on something too, which is back to what I think was maybe the cynical dig about religion, that religion wouldn't exist, if there wasn't death. And now this is back to the afterlife concept, which is a belief. And as we've been looking at in this class, what Stephen Asma and what George Valiant have been arguing in their wonderful books is that beliefs are there, but it's the emotional stuff that is the driving factor. So if somebody feels like, oh, last rites must be administered, or that person's soul is not going to heaven, so that's where the belief comes in. But then there's also emotion tied to that. Oh my goodness, I'm going to feel so guilty that I didn't administer last rites, or I didn't have last rites for my parent or my loved one. If I don't do that right, then they're not going to heaven, and I'm going to deny them an afterlife. So the emotions are even tied to the belief. They really go hand in hand. George Valiant says, there's that famous quote, and Philip, I see your hand, so I want to get to you in a second. But I've quoted, Howard's End, E.M. Forster, the English novelist, that famous line, only connect. And only connect has been taken out of context, and I've taken out of context too myself. It makes it sound like only connect other people, only connect in love, only connect in compassion, what we've been talking about, connecting, relationships, sharing, cooperation. But the quote in the book is only connect the prose and the passion. And by prose, E.M. Forster meant logic and reason, our thoughts, our beliefs, our ideas. Connect that with the emotion. And then when you connect the prose and the passion, when you connect the head and the heart and the cortex with the limbic system, then you're going to have a full human being. It's not either or, it's both and. And so for that person who feels that we need to administer last rites, it's coming from a good place. You know what I mean? It's coming from love. It's coming from care, as if to say, I want to help care for you in the afterlife. And by the way, that's one of the reasons we say Kaddish for 11 months for a parent. In Judaism, it is a spiritual component. It is to help their soul ascend and go to heaven and go to the highest realms of heaven. And that we are caring for our parents when they, after they die, by saying Kaddish for them and helping their soul ascend to heaven in the highest levels of heaven. So we've got it in Judaism too. It's there. And it's not either or. It's both and. If you believe in that, if you have that belief, if it's meaningful to you. Yeah. Yeah, Philip, thank you for your patience. Yeah.
Sure. I was thinking back to the beginning when you were talking about that we're basically made for good and made to be positive, which is certainly reassuring, because too often when negative things happen, we hear, people say, that humanity isn't good. So I liked hearing that. It made me think of two very different people, and this is not at all meant to be political, but I'll start with Anne Frank, who, endured the most horrible suffering and is famously quoted to say, in spite of everything, I still believe that people are good at heart. And, despite all of the challenges that she, had to endure. And kind of on the opposite end, and again, not to really be political, but thinking about Donald Trump, as an individual who seems to, very much so lack empathy and lack compassion. It's good to know that, I guess, for the most part, the good outweigh the negative in humanity.
Yeah, I think, to me, and thank you for that. Thank you for that, Philip. I think those are, yeah, very, very appreciate what you said. I think the spirituality, the role for all of us is to recognize, if we recognize that as human beings, as mammals, we will not thrive individually, and we will not thrive as a society culturally, and we will not thrive as a species, so evolutionarily, without cultivating these emotions and connections that we've been talking about. Compassion and love. We didn't look at gratitude. We didn't look at forgiveness, but that's in George Vaillant's book. They're all of a piece. All of these positive emotions that we were built to manifest that help us thrive individually, culturally, and as a species. It is to our peril if we do not manifest these in our lives, in our society, and from an evolutionary standpoint. We're not gonna continue to exist if we don't. And that's sort of the way I look at this. It's sort of incumbent upon all of us to bring more of these spiritual emotions and into our lives and into each other's lives, because we're just going to make the world better. I mean, this is Tikkun Olam. So forgive me for standing up on the pulpit there and doing rabbi speak, but I feel like when we don't see it, it's almost like a cautionary tale for everybody to say, oh, wait, this is important. This is important. We need to manifest these qualities of connection, these qualities of care. George Vaillant purposely didn't do other positive emotions because he felt that they were selfish. And he wanted to focus on the emotions that connect us to other people, that are not an I, but a we. And these emotions that he identified that we looked at, that I listed, the 8 emotions, those are all we emotions. Yeah, we might get some benefit from it, but somebody else is too. And I think Judaism very much encourages us to live a life of we, right? The Hillel quote. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? So I'm part of the we. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? Not human. Not who we were meant to be. Not who God wants us to be. And if not now, when? The time to start practicing is now for all of us. So thank you. Yeah, Renee, thank you for your patience. Oh, Renee, you want, there we go.
So I unmuted myself, but yeah, before I ask my question, I think, how when people are united, when we're a community, then we're all stronger. And if we're divided, if we're alone, we're isolated and we're weaker. So I think, that's why I like Tikkun Olam and segueing to my question, when we say Kaddish, I thought, and I'm not that learned on Jewish law, but I thought like we're supposed to have a minyan, right? We're supposed to be a minyan when we say Kaddish.
Thank you.
We're not supposed to say it alone. Am I wrong about that? And
No, you're not wrong. I mean,
inform
one, in Reform Judaism, we will do it if we're alone, if we want to honor our loved one and say Kaddish for them. But you're right. Traditionally, one says Kaddish, there need to be 10 people there to, again, have the embrace of community, have the physical touch and the emotional connections that other people give to us. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing up that point. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I know, well, I thought about it recently. Well, as some of you know, Sheila Rhodes and I are going on the March of the Living trip. That's next week. So we will not be at the, Yom HaShoah program that Philippine does an excellent job organizing and getting guest speakers. And I had mentioned to somebody that I had shared with Sheila, we were sitting together at the Temple Sinai Community Seder. I told her I made a copy of Kaddish for her and me to bring so that we could say Kaddish, not only for our loved ones, she's the second generation like me, but to say, and the Haynes for that matter, the Haynes parents, but to say Kaddish for those who have no one to say Kaddish for. And then somebody told me, no, you can't do that. You have to have a minyan. And then I thought, well, I don't know.
Well, so this is again where I think there's value in being reform. To me, it's not all or nothing, right? It's on a continuum. So your impulse to say Kaddish is a beautiful one. It's based on love. It's based on compassion. It's based on a lot of what we've been talking about. If you find that you can't get 10 people there, Renee, Reform Judaism would say, please say Kaddish anyway. Right?
Yeah, because then so many of those people had no one to say, right? I don't know.
Well, by the way, that's why Reform Judaism, that's why we all rise to say Kaddish. That's exactly why. And if you go to a conservative congregation or an Orthodox congregation, the whole congregation doesn't rise to do the entire Kaddish prayer. They'll respond to certain parts of it, but they will not rise to do the whole thing. Reform Judaism did that purposely to say, we are going to say Kaddish for the people who perished in the Shoah, the families who perished in the Holocaust, who have no one to say Kaddish for them. So it was an act of compassion. It was an act of love to say, halachically, this may not be how you do it, but here's how we're going to do it. because we have other Jewish values that we are going to manifest. And similarly, Renee, I'd say you've got other Jewish values that you want to manifest by saying Kaddish on the trip, whether or not there are 10 people present.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Deirdre.
Yeah, I had a question because the question about Catholicism sparked me because I know, saving your soul and having the last rites, which sends your soul to heaven or in the right direction at least, is absolutely fundamental to Catholicism. I was not raised in the church. I was not raised in anything. So I don't have any understanding really of much of spirituality and nor of the soul and what happens after death. What is the Jewish belief of what happens after death? Because it's not clear to me. I mean, a lot of people, including my departed husband, believed that there was a soul and that it goes into the ether somewhere and can follow you around perhaps, or tap you on the shoulder on occasion, whisper in your ear, whatever. That has not been my experience in the month that I've been a widow. That is maybe simply because I'm skeptical, or simply because my mourning started years ago when he started to fail.
Yeah.
And it's been a long process for me. This was not sudden. It was unexpected, but it was not in any way, we probably should have expected it. But I don't know what to do with that gap, that hole that says he was here. When I walk in the door, he's not here anymore. He doesn't, he doesn't exist in my world anymore. Where does he exist, if any, if ever, someplace?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and Deirdre, thank you for sharing that. And again, I just want to say, our condolences to you. We're sorry for your loss. We're sorry for the loss of your husband. And so I'm hoping that some of the things that we talked about tonight will be of comfort and consolation to you, and we can talk more about some other things we can talk about, and some other resources that might help you with that whole. I read something recently, and I think this applies to all of us, because we all walk the mourner's path. We're all, if we haven't, we're going to. Somebody, I don't know if it was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross or somebody else, who said, you don't move on, or I should say, forgive me, move on is not the right expression. I should really have the right quote in my head, but it's something like, this is not something that one gets over. It's one goes forward with the loss. And it's, Judaism and psychology and other faiths would not, I don't think, would have us get over a loss, but to move forward with the loss. And these Jewish mourning customs are meant to move the mourner through the grief process and sort of come out the other end, living a life that is incorporating the loss and moving forward with that loss. Where does Judaism stand on the afterlife? We've done adult ed classes, and I know Jill was smiling at that point, because I did a 3-part series on Jewish views of the afterlife a few years ago, and we might do it again in the years ahead, because it bears repeating. But Deirdre, just to, standing on one foot, as they say, any afterlife concept that you could think of or that you've heard about, Judaism has it. Judaism has all those afterlife concepts: heaven, hell, purgatory, levels of each. It's all there. It's just, what do you believe? And again, here's where we're getting into belief. So Judaism would take the approach, as you said, if you haven't had an experience of feeling somebody's presence or their soul, Judaism would say, okay, it's okay to not believe in that the soul is immortal, but there are Jewish concepts of afterlife that do say the soul is immortal, and it's up to the individual to choose the belief that resonates with them. There's no dogma in Judaism surrounding afterlife. There's no dogma. If afterlife is meaningful to you, then there's plenty there in Judaism to nourish that belief. And if afterlife is not meaningful to you, then there's plenty in Judaism that says there are ways to, still connect with the person through memory, through Jewish ritual customs of lighting a candle, at various times during the year and on the anniversary of the death, and saying their name on the anniversary of the death, and saying Kaddish. So all these practices work whether or not one believes in afterlife. And if one does find afterlife comforting, then there's plenty of material in Judaism, and I can share with you some resources, and other people interested too. There are plenty of great books that talk about it, and we might do another adult ed on that subject. So forgive me, and again, Deirdre, we can talk more. But again, I mean, we're our temple community is here for you, and we're sorry for your loss. We extend our condolences to you. Yeah. Yes, Maggie, and appreciate everybody. I know we're going a little bit over, but I thought that we might. And please stay as long as you'd like. And we'll continue to have some discussion. Yeah, Maggie.
Just want to mention a book that a friend of mine sent to me after my husband died, and it's called Healing After Loss, and it's a book of 365 pages, one for each day, and it's little readings, and some of them are extremely moving and helpful and interesting, and it's just I've gotten into the habit of reading them each day, and it's really very good. I really recommend it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Maggie, if you have the title or the author, maybe you could drop it in the chat box.
Sure.
I know I can ask that of Maggie because she's a retired librarian. So so this type of thing comes naturally to her. So thank you, Maggie. Yeah. And that too, that sounds like a nice daily practice, a daily spiritual practice to comfort, to console, to help feel the grief and heal from the grief. So thank you, Maggie. Healing After Loss is the name.
Yeah, I don't remember the author's name, but
okay. Well, but yeah, I'm sure there aren't too many titles
find that. Thanks.
of that do sort of do the 365 days. Oh, it looks like David found it. Thank you, David.
yes, it's actually cataloged under Christian beliefs, but it's not very Christian as I have found so far. It's pretty general.
Well, and again, this is the universality of these emotions and the universality of grief and loss. And we have a lot to learn from one another. I think religions have a lot to learn from each other regarding this, because it is, one of the most difficult things we ever going to face in life is loss of loved ones. I can't think of anything more difficult. But it just depends on one's experiences. Yeah, Carol.
Deidre, I'm happy to reach out to you. I'm a widow, and I'm more than happy to meet you for coffee and see if I can help you. I've been a widow for about 13 years, and I will hold your hand and listen to you. And so I'm going to call you, if that's okay with you, separate from this evening. Feel
Oh,
free,
sure.
and feel free to call me. You can get my number easily from the office, but I'm more
Okay.
than happy to talk with you.
Great, thank you.
And Rabbi, I have
Yeah,
something that
thank you,
helped
Carol.
me, and
Yeah.
I never thought a lot about it till it happened. But wearing the ribbon helped me because I think I cried a lot maybe inappropriately in public places. And I found that even people who weren't Jewish for somehow knew what that was.
The ribbon
And
for the hostages. Yeah.
well, I wore it after my husband died.
Oh, you were. Oh, I'm sorry. You wore a ribbon. Oh, you're talking about the Kriya ribbon.
Right. And I wore it for, I don't remember if it was 2 weeks or a month. You would know that. But for some reason, it gave me comfort and it allowed other people to reach out for me. I remember getting a blood test, and this couple looked at me and said, "We're really sorry. And what can we do for you?" And I couldn't talk because I was crying. And one sat on each side of me and held my hand in complete silence. And I think two things. I think that helped me a lot, but I also think we don't always need words to help people, that it's okay just to hold their hand and be silent and caring. And they will feel your strength. They will feel your love, but you don't need to say words. Words were very non-meaningful to me after my husband died.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for sharing that and those experiences and that wisdom. Yes, that's a great point. Yeah, it's not. And again, the words, that's all in the neocortex, and that's all in the. And we're talking about emotions, we're talking about touch, we're talking about connection that, as you say, do not require words.
Yeah, I felt if people talked to me, I had to say words back, and I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to say any words to anyone.
Wow. Well, and again, that's why the Jewish practice, we talked about it last week, the Jewish practice is not to speak before the mourner and let them speak first. And the mourner may not want to talk. And so to honor that and to not assume that they want to talk. So so that's very much in keeping with the Jewish, again, the folk psychology, the folk wisdom of the mourner speaks first. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Jill. Thank you for those very thoughtful, caring words. And thank you all. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for participating. We're going to make this recording available. Again, you can find both recordings on our YouTube channel, Temple Sinai of Glendale. And if you go to videos, the most recent videos are there. It'll take about a day for this to process because it's a big file, but we're going to upload tonight's class. Hopefully tomorrow. It will have buffered and completed by tomorrow. And if you didn't attend the first class, that's available online. And I just want to again encourage everybody, our adult education committee chaired by Ruth and Valerie, who are both here with us tonight in the adult ed committee, have fantastic adult ed classes, programs, experiences year round, monthly and weekly. And so please check our Temple website and also participate in those as well. There's such great things there. So again, I want to thank you. Oh, Louise, yes.
I just want to thank you so much for having this kind of a program. I'm sorry, but talking about death and so on and so forth brings out a lot of emotions. But all your emotions that you talk about, last week there was a lot of the joy and awe, and today there was many, many emotions that we all think about, but we don't really talk about. And this is so wonderful that you bring it out and that you do it in such a
such a beautiful way, and so touching and moving, at least for me, and I'm sure
Thank
for
you.
everybody. And thank you. I just want to thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Louise. I appreciate that. And thanks for, the comments in the chat box. And, along those lines, I want to encourage everybody, if you can think of other ways to bring more, healing and positive emotions into what we do at Temple Sinai, please let us know. I really do agree with the thesis of both books that emotions are the driving factor of religious life. And again, the cognitive and the teachings are very important too. But I do think at the end of the day, the emotional component is what brings people back again and again, and what builds community. And of course, we didn't even reference it by well, we did reference, we talked about community, but community is all about emotion, right? You're not going to have a meaningful community that you want to be a part of if you're not experiencing these positive emotions on a regular basis. So thank you all for all the positive emotions that you bring and all the spiritual emotions that you bring to us and to our temple community. And again, wishing you a very continued happy Passover season. And we'll look forward to seeing each other again and being there for each other. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Oh, thanks, Susan. Thank you so much. And
All
thanks
right.
again,
I'll
Louise.
see you Thursday.
See you Thursday.
Good night.